James Lucas has made a life out of not staying. Hotels instead of homes, boarding passes instead of promises. But somewhere between departure gates and champagne lounges, he keeps running into the same flight attendant, Sophia. She's calm where he's restless, grounded while he's always in motion. At 30,000 feet, they begin to fall, not through turbulence, but into something terrifyingly real. But love in transit is never simple. Can two people who live for the skies find something worth landing for? Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The airport buzzed with its usual 11 p.m. lullaby. Low murmurs of last calls, the quiet clack of suitcase wheels on polished tile, and the distant thrum of engines beyond the glass. James Lucas moved through it like a ghost in a tailored coat, his silver carry-on gliding behind him like an obedient shadow. His eyes were on the departure board, though he already knew his gate. Seoul, Flight 283 on time. He checked in, breezed through security with a well-rehearsed efficiency, and sank into his usual pre-boarding routine. Flat white from a kiosk barista who didn't look up, AirPods in, audiobook humming some forgotten business memoir in his ears. Another city, another client, another bed he wouldn't remember next month. He had long stopped romanticizing travel. Airports were just in-between spaces. A necessary purgatory. Until tonight. Boarding was called, and he joined the slow shuffle of tired travelers filtering down the jet bridge. He stepped into the cabin, nodding politely at the crew, not really seeing them until he did. Her. She stood near the entrance of the aircraft, angled slightly toward the door, greeting passengers with a practiced grace that somehow didn't feel forced. Her dark hair was pulled into a tidy chignon, a few strands softening around her temple, and her navy uniform fit with the crispness of someone who gave a damn. Her name tag read Sophia. That name rang like a small bell in the back of James's memory. Had she been on a flight to London last month? Or maybe Singapore? He couldn't be sure, but he recognized the way her eyes lit up when she smiled, like they weren't just going through the motions. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice calm and melodic. "Evening," James replied, offering a nod as their eyes briefly met. He moved down the aisle and found his seat, 11A window. Business class. He stowed his bag, sat, and fastened his belt. But for once, his thoughts didn't immediately leap to deadlines or tomorrow's presentation. They lingered at the front of the plane, where she stood. Sophia. There was something about the name that felt familiar now. He had a strange hunch she'd been on several of his flights, though it might have just been his tired brain playing tricks. Still, the feeling tugged at him like gravity. As passengers finished boarding, she moved through the cabin, checking overhead compartments and offering help with the effortless rhythm of someone who had done this 1,000 times. When she passed his row, her eyes briefly flicked toward him. Just a glance, nothing more, but something passed between them. Recognition? Curiosity? James didn't look away. He'd spent years mastering the art of detachment. People in suits were just meetings. People on planes were just noise. He didn't do connections, he did contracts. But for reasons he couldn't explain, he wanted her to look back. Just once more. She didn't. Not yet. As the plane pushed back from the gate and the cabin lights dimmed, James leaned his head against the window and closed his eyes. Somewhere above the clouds, 35,000 feet over the Pacific, he'd wake up in a new time zone. That was his life. But for the first time in a long while, he hoped that when he opened his eyes again, she would still be there. Not just on this flight, but maybe the next one too. The next time James saw her, it was over the Atlantic. It had been 2 weeks since the Seoul trip. He was flying from JFK to Charles de Gaulle, a red-eye again, his preferred time to disappear between continents. The gate was crowded, the air stale with exhaustion and the plasticky scent of overpriced sandwiches. James stood apart, sipping a ginger tea he didn't want, scanning the lounge without thinking. Then he saw her. Sophia. Same uniform. Same air of effortless calm. She was checking a clipboard, head tilted slightly as she listened to a junior crew member. Her laugh was soft but carried just enough to reach him. A low ripple that rose above the boarding announcements and coughs. It had the same effect as a warm light in a cold hallway. He wasn't expecting to see her again. But there she was, real as the plane parked outside. Flight 117 to Paris is now boarding all Delta One and Sky Priority passengers. He moved with the wave of priority travelers. As he stepped onto the plane, Sophia stood near the entrance again, just like before. "Welcome aboard, mister." She glanced down at the manifest she was holding. "Lucas." Her tone was perfectly professional, but her eyes sparkled with faint recognition. James raised an eyebrow. "I guess I'm officially a regular. Or we're just on the same strange loop," she said with a soft smirk. 11A again? He chuckled. "Creature of habit. Good seat. Better views than mine." Their exchange was brief, but the air shifted. Something familiar now tethered them, a thread spun between one flight and the next. He walked to his seat, slipped into the wide leather chair, and tried to focus on an article he'd saved to read. But his eyes kept drifting forward, following the faint outline of her shape whenever she moved through the aisle. She was precise but never robotic, elegant without effort. She helped an elderly man with his blanket, crouched to speak gently to a fussy child, laughed with a fellow attendant near the galley curtain. She didn't have to be kind. It was something she chose. Mid-flight, somewhere over Newfoundland, she approached him with a tray. "Still ginger tea, Mr. Lucas?" He smiled. "You remembered." "I try." He took the cup, their fingers grazing for half a second, enough to notice. She didn't pull away quickly. He didn't pretend not to feel it. "You travel a lot," she said. It was a statement, not a question. "Too much." She nodded. "Most people who fly this often either love it or are running from something." James leaned back in his seat, sipping slowly, eyes on her. "Which one are you?" Sophia gave the smallest shrug, one shoulder lifting like a wave about to break. "Maybe a little of both." She moved on before he could answer, before he could ask more. The curtain swished closed behind her, leaving James staring at the soft blue glow of the overhead lights. The rest of the flight passed in fragments, half-sleep, blinking lights, the distant hush of someone crying in the dark. When the plane began to descend over the blinking lights of Paris, James watched her one more time as she moved through the aisle, checking seatbelts, reminding a couple to stow their tray tables. She smiled at him as they landed. And as he walked off the jet bridge, suitcase in tow, he looked back only once. She was already turning away, already part of another story, another stranger's sky. But something inside him, quiet and patient, was beginning to wait for the next time. The flight to Amsterdam started smooth. Too smooth. James had barely slept the night before. Another pitch, another client, another champagne handshake over hollow promises. The hotel had been sterile and overly perfumed, and the pillows too stiff. He wasn't tired, but he was drained, like a phone at 5% with a broken charger. As he stepped into the aircraft, the cabin air hit him like déjà vu. This time, she wasn't by the door. He scanned casually, not obviously, then caught sight of her near the galley. She was pinning her name tag onto her jacket, fingers moving with muscle memory. "Sophia." He didn't smile. Not yet. He waited until she looked up. She noticed him mid-motion, paused, then lifted her brows in a mixture of amusement and surprise. 11A again? She asked when she passed by his row during boarding. "I'm beginning to think this seat's cursed," he replied. "Or lucky." Her voice had that soft steadiness he'd come to recognize, like the hum of cabin pressure, always present beneath the chaos. He found himself watching the way she adjusted the lapels of her uniform, how she pressed her fingertips to her temple when checking the passenger manifest. There was something comforting about her precision. An hour into the flight, over the North Sea, the plane began to shudder. It started with a gentle vibration, subtle enough that most passengers ignored it. Then came the abrupt jolt, the kind that made overhead bins rattle and hearts skip. Drinks sloshed. Someone gasped. A baby started wailing near the back. James gripped his armrest. He wasn't afraid of flying, he told himself that. But something about not being in control, about the invisible hands of air currents jerking them around like a child's toy, made him clench his jaw, stare at the seat in front of him, and feel the old panic crawl up his chest. Then she was there. Sophia appeared beside him, crouching slightly so she could be eye level. Her hand rested lightly on the edge of the empty seat across the aisle, steadying herself. You okay? She asked gently. He nodded too quickly. She tilted her head. You're holding that armrest like it owes you money. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Just adrenaline. Good. That means you're awake. Her eyes sparkled despite the flickering seatbelt sign above them. Want me to distract you? He smirked, trying to shake off the tension. Is that part of the in-flight service? Only for repeat offenders. She leaned in slightly. Okay, quick game. You have to answer fast. Window or aisle? Window. Sweet or salty? Salty. Morning flights or red ice? He paused. She smiled. Too slow. You lose. The turbulence jerked the plane again, harder this time. A tray somewhere clattered to the floor. Someone swore under their breath. Sophia didn't flinch. Look at me, she said, her voice calm, not commanding. Don't look out the window. Don't think about the shaking. Just look. He did. Her eyes were the color of early morning light through clouds, and for a moment he forgot everything else. The engines, the seatbelt sign, the gut-deep unease he never admitted to anyone. There was nothing but her, steady and real and absurdly close. When the plane finally leveled out, the passengers let out a collective sigh of relief. Sophia stood, adjusting her jacket. See, she said. Told you. Cursed. Or lucky. Before he could say anything more, she disappeared down the aisle again, leaving behind the faint scent of lavender and citrus and the kind of stillness that lingers after a storm. James leaned back in his seat and stared at the ceiling, the soft throb of adrenaline still in his chest. It wasn't just turbulence. It was her. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something pulling him that wasn't a job, a deadline, or a departure time. It was her laugh, her calm, her steadiness in the middle of shaking. It was Sophia. Rome. The air was heavy with the warmth of early spring, tinged with espresso steam and centuries-old dust. Light spilled across cobbled streets like melted gold, catching on the faces of tourists and locals alike. And among them walked James Lucas, hands in his coat pockets, eyes scanning the crowd of arriving passengers outside Terminal 3. He wasn't here on business. For once, there was no pitched deck in his briefcase. No meeting. No deal. He was here for her. It had taken 3 weeks and a few carefully worded texts to make it happen. After the Amsterdam flight, he'd found her name on the airline's crew app. Nothing invasive, just the schedule lookup he wasn't sure he was supposed to know how to use. Then came a message. Brief. Respectful. Layover in Rome next week. If you're free, coffee. To his surprise, she said yes. To his greater surprise, she hadn't sent a follow-up to cancel. He saw her before she saw him, walking through the terminal doors, no uniform, no navy jacket or airline pin. Just a simple white blouse tucked into dark jeans, her hair pulled into a low ponytail. She looked almost unfamiliar without the formality. Softer. Real. James, she said, spotting him. Her smile unfurled naturally, like it had been waiting. Sophia, he replied, feeling his own voice lower, like the sound belonged somewhere quieter. You made it. You look different without a tray table in front of you. You look different without 4 wheels under your feet. She laughed. I walk just fine. Come on, I know a place. They walked without rush. Rome wrapped around them like a film scene, shuttered windows with flower boxes, the hum of scooters buzzing past, a woman singing somewhere 2 streets over. They found a tiny cafe tucked between an alley and a bookstore, just a few tables, one sleepy barista, and an old radio playing Lucio Battisti. They sat across from each other with cappuccinos in hand, and for a moment neither spoke. You always this quiet on land? She asked. James smiled. Usually I'm talking to people who want something from me. Selling something. Fixing something. This is, he looked around. This is better. She stirred her drink slowly. You know, most people only remember flight attendants when they're being yelled at or bringing peanuts. Not you, he said too quickly. Then, I mean, you're not just that. Sophia looked at him for a long second. Not flattered. Not flustered. Just watching. I like the sky, she said. But I don't live up there. I paint. On days off. Landscapes, mostly. Places I've never had time to stay in. James blinked. You paint. I'm not amazing or anything, she shrugged. But it reminds me to stop and look. You. He hesitated. I used to write short stories, college stuff. Gave it up when work started paying the bills. Why? Because somewhere along the way, I convinced myself it didn't matter. She studied him for a beat. Maybe you're starting to realize it still does. He didn't respond right away. The cafe was quiet, the smell of espresso mingling with the breeze. He looked out the window and saw an old man with a violin playing under a fig tree. He turned back to her. This feels weird. What does? This. You. No turbulence. No drink carts. No 2-minute conversations broken by seatbelt signs. Sophia smiled a little sadly. We're just two people now. Nothing scheduled to keep us close. He exhaled. I didn't expect that to feel scarier than the sky. They talked until the shadows shifted and the coffee cups sat empty. There was no rush to be somewhere else. No terminal to catch. Just two people realizing that sometimes the rarest connection is the one that happens off the clock, when the uniform is gone and the masks drop, and you're just there. And when she finally stood, adjusting the strap of her bag over her shoulder, James felt it. That familiar ache that only came when something real was at risk of being temporary. I'll see you again, he said. Sophia tilted her head. In the air or somewhere else? He swallowed. Hopefully both. She leaned forward, her voice soft against the warm Rome afternoon. Next time, she said, don't wait for turbulence to start talking. Then she was gone, slipping into the crowd outside, leaving James with the lingering taste of espresso and a new feeling taking root somewhere in his chest. Not infatuation. Not routine. Hope. The months that followed weren't defined by seasons, but by airports. Munich in March. Vancouver in April. Cairo in May. The calendar didn't mark time for James Lucas anymore. Flight numbers did. And in the quiet spaces between boardrooms and jet bridges, Sophia became the only constant that felt worth chasing. They weren't a couple. Not exactly. They weren't strangers either. There were video calls at odd hours. Him in a hotel robe somewhere in Dubai, her wrapped in a blanket on her layover in Dublin. There were voice notes whispered from terminals, blurry photos of cafe corners, jokes about airport fashion. They met when they could, 2 or 3 times, never long enough. Berlin, they spent a rainy afternoon hiding from tourists in a tiny record store. In Tokyo, she snuck him into the staff lounge, and they shared vending machine ramen, laughing like they had a lifetime to waste. But the sky always stole her back, and work always pulled him forward. One night, in a hotel room in Chicago, James stared at a text Sophia had sent hours earlier. Sophia. Landed in Cape Town. Sorry I missed your call. We're doing a 3-day loop through Africa. No signal most of the time. Talk soon? Talk soon. Those words had started to feel like a promise they couldn't keep. The next day, during a pitch to a major cosmetics brand, James heard his voice falter when someone asked him about long-term strategy. He blinked, confused for a moment. His brain, so good at performance, was somewhere else. He gave a vague answer, recovered the meeting, but he left the building with a gnawing tightness in his chest. Later that week, Sophia called during a rare overlap in time zones. She looked tired, mascara smudged under her eyes, hair loose from a messy bun. She was in a hotel bed somewhere in Bangkok, her voice low and distant. I've been thinking, she said. Are we doing this because we really want each other, or because this life makes everything else feel unreachable? He sat in silence, processing. I don't know, he said honestly. But I know I wait for your name to show up on my phone more than anything else. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It's starting to feel like we're chasing something we only get in pieces. James leaned back against his headboard, the light from his laptop painting his room in blue. You're not a piece. You're the only thing that feels whole. She looked away for a moment, then back. You live in transit, James. I do too. Maybe we fell in love with a version of each other that only exists when everything else is paused. Her words hit harder than he expected. And the worst part was, she might have been right. Their connection had thrived in the spaces between lives. In the stillness of turbulence. In stolen hours and shared silence. But reality was catching up. No one can live forever in the in-between. A week passed without contact. Another went by. He sent a message. She didn't reply. Then, a month later, he boarded a flight to Lisbon for a strategy summit. First class again. Gate 57B. He walked the bridge, heart quiet, not expecting her. She wasn't there. Of course not. It wasn't magic. It was math. Schedules. Probability. The illusion of fate running out. He took his seat in 11A. The seat beside him was empty. For once, he didn't sleep on the flight. He stared out the window into a night sky dotted with stars he couldn't name. It was silent in his mind, which scared him more than turbulence ever had. Because now he knew what it felt like to miss someone who was never really yours to begin with. Lisbon glowed like a postcard in the late afternoon. Narrow streets soaked in sun, laundry strung between pale buildings, the faint brine of sea air rolling in from the harbor. From the terrace of a minimalist rooftop cafe, James Lucas could see the red-tiled roofs stretching toward the Tagus River, their shadows long and soft. But his mind wasn't on the view. It was on his phone, and the silence on the other end of it. It had been 41 days since he last heard Sophia's voice. 32 since her last text. 11 since he'd replied to it. Carefully, respectfully, without pressure. Just wanted to know you're okay. No expectations. I miss talking to you. He had reread the message so many times he could see it even when he closed his eyes. The job offer was in a crisp envelope on the cafe table, weighted by his coffee cup. The agency wanted him full-time. Lisbon-based. Fewer flights. Less glamour, but more control. More calm. And maybe something like home. He wasn't sure why he hadn't answered yet. Maybe because deep down, it wasn't the job he was afraid of. It was what it represented. That he could stop running. That he could choose stillness. That he could finally become someone worth staying for. He didn't know if Sophia would care. Maybe she had moved on, back to a world of departures and smiling at strangers in row 22. Maybe their brief orbit around each other had been nothing more than the natural burn of two satellites passing in the same sky. But part of him, the part that had stopped believing in coincidence, hoped she was still waiting for a reason. That evening, he wandered the Alfama district aimless. The music of a Fado singer spilled from a tavern, full of longing and lacework sadness. His feet found their way to the waterfront, where fishing boats bobbed like toy models, and the sun dipped low over the bridge. He opened his phone again. Still nothing. He was about to pocket it when it buzzed. Sophia. He didn't open the message immediately. His thumb hovered for a beat too long. When he did, it was short. Simple. Sophia. Lisbon. 2-night layover. Didn't expect it. I'm here if you want to talk. I'll understand if not. His heart hammered like takeoff. No punctuation. No emojis. Just space. He ran. Actually ran. Through alleyways and across cobblestones slick with old rain, toward the hotel where she might be, where maybe, finally, the in-between would end. He found her in the hotel lounge. No uniform. No coffee cup in hand. Just Sophia, sitting on a velvet couch, looking out the window at a city she hadn't had time to explore. When she saw him, she stood up slowly, her face unreadable at first. Then he smiled, and she did too. He walked to her, stood there for a moment, hands still in his jacket like he didn't trust himself to speak without touching her. I got a job offer, he said. Here. Lisbon. Grounded, mostly. Sophia's eyes flickered. Are you taking it? He took a breath. I didn't come here to tell you that. Then why? He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key. Not flashy. Just brass, worn from use. I found a place. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom. Terrible Wi-Fi. Big windows. Smells like the ocean. Her voice dropped. Why are you telling me this? Because you once said you wanted somewhere to paint. Somewhere not just in passing. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't blink. And you? I'm tired of passing through. His voice cracked just slightly. I don't want a life I have to escape from. I want a life that makes staying worth it. With someone who makes it real. For a long moment, the city moved around them. Cars, footsteps, music drifting through the open lobby doors. Then Sophia stepped forward and gently took the key from his hand. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. The weight of the brass in her palm was enough. It was raining in Tokyo, not the romantic kind, but a persistent drizzle that soaked through collars and turned sidewalks into mirrors. Umbrellas bobbed through the city like jellyfish, translucent and trembling. James stood outside gate 42, his hair damp, coat heavy, lungs burning from the sprint through Narita's maze of escalators and signs. He was too late. The gate was closing. The flight was hers. For a moment, he just stood there, watching the last passengers disappear into the tunnel of the jet bridge, watched the airline staff begin their practice dance of sealing off the moment. His chest rose and fell too fast. His bag sagged against his shoulder. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He had planned. He'd taken the early meeting, skipped lunch, even turned down a client dinner to get to the airport early. He had flowers. He had words. He was supposed to be there before boarding. He was supposed to see her face when she turned around and found him standing there. He wasn't supposed to miss the damn flight. "Excuse me," he said to the gate agent, breathless. "Sophia. Flight attendant. She's on this one. Is there any way?" The woman smiled, polite but immovable. "I'm sorry, sir. Doors are closed." He looked past her, through the long glass wall. The plane sat still, lights blinking in the gray mist, rain streaking the windows. Somewhere inside, she was sliding her bag into the crew locker, fixing her collar, rehearsing that calm voice she always wore in the sky. She had no idea he was even here. He stepped back, stared at the tarmac, heart hammering louder than any announcement over the PA. And then he pulled out his phone. There was one message sitting unread. "Sophia, didn't think you'd make it. It's okay if you didn't. Just wanted you to know. I was hoping you would." His fingers moved before he could overthink. "James. Still here. At the gate. I ran. I'm sorry. Wait for me in Seoul? Please." He stared at the message. Sent. Read. Then nothing. Until his phone buzzed. "Sophia, you always miss the flight. But you never miss the moment." He exhaled. A breath he'd been holding for weeks. Then came the photo, blurry, taken from inside the plane. A cup of coffee. A napkin with a heart drawn in pen. And below it, her words. "If you're serious, come find me when we land." 3 hours later, Seoul's Incheon airport bustled under fluorescent lights. James waited at the arrivals area with no flowers, no dramatic speech. Just the key still in his pocket, the one he never took off his keyring. And then there she was. She moved through the automatic doors, wheeling a small suitcase, hair slightly undone, eyes scanning the crowd. When she saw him, she didn't smile immediately. She walked up slow. Measured. "You made it." He nodded. "I'll keep making it." She watched him a long time, the silence between them louder than the voices around them. Then she stepped close, reached into his coat pocket, and pulled out the key. Still warm from his hand. She held it up. "This yours?" "No," James said. "Ours. If you want it." Sophia looked down at the key. Then up at him. "I'm tired of running too." And this time, when they walked away from the airport, they did it together. Lisbon. The mornings came slow and gold now. The apartment James found, the one with uneven floors and sea-salted windows, sat above a bakery that opened too early and closed too late. It smelled like toasted almonds and fresh bread, and every morning the scent drifted through the open shutters as sunlight crept across the tile. Sophia stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing one of James's old shirts, paint flecks on her cheek, tea steaming on the counter. The walls were bare except for one canvas, unfinished. Blue skies and coastline. The horizon stretched long and open, as if she hadn't decided where it was leading yet. She still flew. Not as often. Not as far. She picked her routes now, short haul mostly, enough to scratch the itch without leaving the ground behind completely. And every time she left, she came back. Always. James wrote again. Not decks. Not campaigns. Stories. A freelance gig turned into a column, then a travel memoir in draft form. 30,000 feet and falling. He didn't write about her directly, but she was in everything. Some days, he still found himself pacing like he used to in terminals, restless with ideas. Other days, he just sat by the window, watching the tide roll in and out, thinking about how strange it was to finally live in a place he didn't want to leave. Today was one of the good ones. Sophia came over, held out a mug. "You're in your head again." "Was I obvious?" "Always. You get this look like you're flying without a plane." He took the tea, smiling. Still figuring out how to land. She kissed the top of his head, light as mist. "You landed. You just haven't unpacked." Outside, the bells of a passing tram clanged down the hill. Laundry danced on lines. A stray cat curled under the bench near their front door. James turned toward her, watching the way her hair caught the light. You know what I miss? She raised a brow. The in-flight pretzels? Seeing you in an aisle, handing me ginger tea. Not knowing if I'd get to talk to you for 2 minutes or 2 hours. Sophia leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You miss the mystery? I missed the moment before I knew it was real. She walked over and took his face in her hands. It's still real. Even now. Even in pajamas and morning breath and half-finished canvases. He laughed soft and low. Especially then. There was no grand crescendo. No plane lifting off or storm to fly through. Just sunlight and tea, and the sound of their quiet life wrapping around them like a warm blanket. Later that afternoon, they went for a walk down to the marina. She held his hand. He carried a notebook. They stopped by a booth selling postcards. James flipped through them, smiling at one that showed an airplane mid-climb. He turned it over and scribbled something on the back. Handed it to her. Sophia read the message slowly. You were never turbulence. You were the sky I didn't know I needed to fly through. She looked up at him, blinking. Too cheesy, he asked. She slipped the card into her pocket, grinning. Perfect. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. They just walked, hand in hand, past boats and quiet waves and an old man feeding pigeons near the dock. Because sometimes the most remarkable thing isn't falling in love mid-flight. It's choosing to stay grounded with someone, day after day. Even when there's no destination in sight. And that, at last, was home.